Good afternoon. My name is Mike Haney, and welcome to this very special edition of 60 Minutes in Black America. I promise you today's conversation will be interesting and compelling, and we'll be right back with that conversation. Hey, welcome back again. This is Mike Haney with 60 Minutes in Black America. Today's show is going to be a great show. Matter of fact, we're waiting for our guest, Delegate Dan Cox, who's a Republican gubernatorial candidate here in the state of Maryland, Trump endorsed candidate for governor for the state of Maryland. Just hear his platform and hear what he has to say. We're waiting for Delegate Cox to come into the studio. And the reason that we have been delayed throughout the day because of a very unfortunate funeral today of first class trooper Glenn Hilliard, who was buried today in Worcester County, Maryland. Trooper Hilliard was murdered by a gunman in the line of duty. And Delegate Cox is attending his funeral, which started this afternoon. And, what better reason for Delegate Cox not to be here or be in studio at this point? And, I just got a message that he's on his way into our studio, and we're going to be gracious and await that. And if something happens and it doesn't, then we'll figure something else out. At some point in life, some things come first. And the fact that he's representing us and he's representing the state, he's representing his constituents at such a unfortunate funeral is commendable for Delegate Cox. But let's talk for a minute about today's conversation with Delegate Cox, because I've heard all sorts of feedback about, hey, you got a guy that's endorsed by Donald Trump on the show, etc. You know what? Today's conversation is going to be a good, enlightening conversation. We're not looking for sound bites. Delegate Cox is going to be treated with the utmost respects, with the questions that he's asked, and given an opportunity to provide his platform, because we need to be engaged in these conversations. Not that we always have to agree with each other, but we have to be in communication with each other. And to that point, those of you that may have questions or may have comments, hey, do me a favor, keep them respectable. You know what I'm saying? Keep them respectable, because if not, the production team has been instructed not to even let them come into the stream, because just because we disagree with someone, and particularly over the course of the past 4 years, politics in this country has taken a diversion that is profound. I sat before we went live today and watched a bit of the House January 6 hearings on that commentary, and how disappointing in a lot of regards, but, does Delegate Cox deserve an opportunity to let us know how he plans to govern our state in the event that he's elected? And, hey, let's not take it as though he can't, because he's real close as it relates to the polls for the Republican gubernatorial primary to be held in Maryland in July 19th. And we know that we've seen a bunch of primaries around the country in which, it's a Trump Republican or a regular Republican. I don't quite understand it, but we're going to ask Delegate Cox about that and kind of explain to us, what the kind of difference is. I've heard the term rhino, Republican in name only, and we can talk about the gubernatorial candidate for the Republican Party, Mastriana, I believe is his name, in Pennsylvania, and he just won that primary up there for representation of the Republican Party, and having been endorsed by Donald Trump. But back to the point in terms of us having conversation and having serious, intimate conversation with even those that we don't not always agree with. And it isn't as though this show called 60 Minutes in Black America, in which maybe the demographics are primarily Black, but we hear from a very diverse demographics, you know what I'm saying, that we shouldn't be listening or speaking to others that don't always agree with us. But let's remember, when Donald Trump was in office, we had a group of Black, historically Black college presidents go visit him. Matter of fact, I think they even left there with quite a few tens of millions of dollars for their institution, and they didn't say no. And, you know, to their point, to go and have conversation, even though, you know, they may not necessarily agree with his policy, was important. And then let's not forget about a number of American bishops that went to the White House and visited Donald Trump, speaking with him. Matter of fact, one of them in this area went there and invited back for, at that point, what we call opportunity zones, et cetera, for funding for our community. So whether I agree or not, because this show is a show that is open to all thoughts and all opinions, and it's important for me to put in front of our viewers both sides of the perspectives so that you can weigh and you can judge and you can hear from yourself firsthand, because a lot of stuff we get secondhand. And then let's talk about Kwame Brown. Kwame was the former mayor of Detroit, Michigan. And I believe that on Donald Trump's last day or so, Kwame got relieved of doing 25 years in the pen, man. You know what I'm saying? Donald Trump gave him a presidential pardon. Now you ask Kwame what he feels about, you know, Donald Trump, et cetera. So my whole point is that as we talk about policies and we talk about people and we talk about human beings, are there differences, right? Because as you hear from Delegate Cox, if he has opportunity to get in the studio, you know, he's a human being. He's a human being for family, he likes to do things, et cetera, et cetera. And is that not more important for us to hear about people? You know, what makes them tick? What do they like to do, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to spend, as we always do on this show, time to get to know someone. Time to get to know someone because it's important. And as Kwame Brown and as the historically Black college presidents and as the bishops of mega churches here in this country, Black, that went to the White House to see Donald Trump, there are a multitude of Black Republicans in this country, you know, that may not necessarily agree with everything with that party, but there are things that they agree with that party. And we kind of have to be open-minded to hear what it is that they agree with, you know, based on education values, based on crime and justice values, based on social justice values, based on environmental values. What about law and order? You know, what is QAnon? You know, what is it about the mass murders and guns and weapons that keep Republicans and Democrats apart? You know, what is it about social programs? You know, what is it about the people in our demographics, you know, Blacks, that may support Republican initiatives? And that's why it's so important that we have these conversations today. You know, I had an opportunity yesterday to talk to some Black Republicans on the eastern shore of Maryland. And it is all about the special interests. And it looks as though Senator Delegate Cox, I just promoted him to senator, maybe he should be, just like Delegate Cox just came into the studio. So I'm going to wrap up my little monologue. But as I was mentioning, I had an opportunity to speak to some Black Republicans on the eastern shore of Maryland yesterday. And one of them is a very good friend of mine. To tell you, that I was taken aback a bit about his comments and his concerns. I kind of was. And like I said, for me, it's not a matter of you knowing which side of the fence I'm on, because that is irrelevant to bringing topics and conversations for Maryland, for the United States of America, because at the end of the day, we are still all one people with different beliefs, with different opinions. And as I mentioned today, we're going to hear the opinion of Dan Cox, and we're going to do so respectfully. But to get back to what Buck, my buddy, said about the Eastern Shore and the issues that they have, Delegate Cox, how are you doing, man? And I think they got you on mute. Are you
There we
there?
go. I'm doing wonderful, Michael. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you
Hey,
hear me now?
thank you so much for being here. We're going to get to the reason. We explain to the viewers, the good point, unfortunate point of why, we had to reschedule a couple of times. But to get back to Buck's thoughts about politics in this state, he mentioned the Democratic candidate. And this is a black man in the Eastern Shore that has a business that said that the Democrats do not serve him well at all as it relates to his Waterman business, and that, he's going to listen to Dan today on my show, but he says if Dan doesn't understand the environment like Kelly Schultz does, he's putting Kelly Schultz on his bumper, right? Because she supports what his business and the black watermen on the Eastern Shore need in order to keep a living and to be able to live. But they also understand the protection of the bay and environment. So we're going to get to some environmental questions. But to my point, if we as a people don't have these conversations and don't understand that there are ones that are African Americans that believe in some of the same values as Republicans believe in. And maybe it's a mixture, maybe it's a merge, maybe it's a migration of ones that will be of the best interests of all the people of this country. So let's bring Delegate Cox into the stream, gubernatorial candidate for the state of Maryland, the Republican Party. Delegate Cox, again, welcome, man. And what I'd like to do, Delegate Cox, before I begin conversation with you, is to acknowledge first class trooper Hilliard, whose funeral you just left, and him giving his life to the people of this state and the people of his county. If we can just acknowledge him with a sincere moment of silence, because you spent your entire afternoon just about down there funeralizing this heroic state trooper, and the less we can do is give a minute of our time. So just a moment of silence for first class trooper Hilliard. Thank you all very much. And I'm always one that believes a minute is a minute, because as we become emotional during that minute about why we're given a moment of silence, maybe we'll begin to change the dynamics of what is happening, particularly relative to some of the atrocities in our country and in our state. But Delegate Cox, I know you've had an emotional afternoon. I can't tell you how grateful I am to have you here today. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. Our production team is looking forward to this conversation. So let me go with that usual question, man, of, hey, Delegate Cox, how you doing?
Thank you, Michael. I'm doing okay, because the funeral, 3.5 hours of church here in Salisbury, was not put forward as a a typical funeral. It was put forward as a remembrance of honor, integrity, and a celebration of life, of the life of this wonderful man. And I tell you, his wife and his children, the strength and love and hope that they are demonstrating. There wasn't a dry eye in that crowd, and there's probably 3,000 people here. In fact, I just ran over here now. I apologize to everyone for the delay. They just had the motorcycle motorcade that just left, and I wanted to give my respects to make sure I didn't cut out early there, since I was over in the in one of the earlier rows of people. So, but it's a reminder. It's a sobering reminder, Michael, of the fact that all of us are together in this state, that our lives are interconnected, and that we share a common goal for the peace of our families and for the greatness of our state, and to make sure that we have a semblance of the rule of law and the honor and integrity that we want to build into our children. That is something that we can look for in the future. It's just a real tragedy that this individual was, that really executed, is what I understand. And Officer Hillard, by the way, he was promoted posthumously to corporal, which was a real tearjerker. I mean, that was because if you knew the backstory, they told the backstory about how he had asked to be reassigned out of a nice, very excellent position that he had in CID, whatever unit that was, a nice special unit that he was in. And he specifically asked to go back onto patrol. And his reason was he wanted to better himself for his promotion. He was wanting corporal and better pay and leadership in the department. So talk about an emotional and an impactful and really a hopeful ceremony and day. And it kind of brought, for me as a public official, a lot of kind of a sober outlook. I was there with the Speaker of the House today, Adrian Jones, my friend. And I think about the fact that in my committee that we stopped some of the defund the police movement. In fact, many of our citizens from the, our Marylanders from Baltimore City came in and helped in many regards to say, no, we don't want to defund the police in Maryland. We want to make sure we have the best training, the best funding, and the best opportunities for a peaceful state. And the last thing we want to do is to chase our peace officers out of the state. And so I was part of that effort in my committee, and there's obviously a lot more work to be done. And
we want to talk about that work. And one of the things, and again, I thank you because I know you're in a very challenging position. And one thing I love about this particular show and having you on is that it gives you a chance to, talk about in depth and not sound bites, so people really get a sense of who you are and what you believe in. But first, humanizing people, because you're a human being. And part of you being a good human being or a great human being, is being where you are and celebrating someone's life with their family and being supportive of where you are. Is talk about you. Let's, so I want to spend a few minutes and, hey, how about that first slide, because I've got some slides that kind of like guide us a bit. And of course, this is you and, Donald Trump, and that's huge. And we'll talk about what that meant for you and what it means for you, because you're a serious, viable candidate. But tell me who this next wonderful person is and what meaning is she in your life, Delegate Cox? Who is that?
This is my lovely bride of 26 years as of June 15th. Valerie and I have been married 26 years, and we have actually 10 children. We have a 3-month-old, and this was a little anecdote. We announced that we were going to take this freedom flag forward. We were going to talk about the liberties of the individual, that no more we're going to have an experimental jab forced on us, and we were going to run for governor because no one else was willing to do that. And Then about, I think it was exactly a month later, we find out that we're expecting.
Hey,
So,
man, well, that was a great conversation then, huh?
well,
So,
I could say so. I could say now, you know, in my defense, my wife actually told me when we were engaged 27 years ago, she said that she wanted 10 kids. So that was,
wow, man. Well, I tell you, you have been at work, and let me see, because I was going to help you straighten out that narrative because I was reading, because I've been researching you for a while, because I want to make sure that, I know as much as I can about you. And a couple things we have in common, a couple things. And so I was one, two, three, because somewhere said 10 with a picture of nine, and
right.
somewhere said 10 with a picture of 10. And I said, okay, 9 or 10. But at that point, who's counting anyway, right?
That's right. That's right. Well,
So that next picture, what's that next picture?
after four, you start losing track.
Absolutely. So this is the one
So,
I think where I only counted one, two, three, four,
right.
five, six, seven,
Might
eight,
be eight
nine,
in there.
right?
Yeah, that's,
So the
yes.
3-year-old is not there yet, right?
That's right. And also, actually, our oldest son is, at the time of this picture, he was still in the Army.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and you can see our little guy there was, he was ready to get out of there. He was tired of the tour.
Wow, man. Well,
So,
I tell you, Delegate Cox, this is an awesome, awesome picture, man. I
well,
have 5 kids and 10 grandkids, and I can only imagine you have double the load, and then you want to be governor. You've been delegate, you're an attorney, and we'll talk about some of that. But I got to tell you, that's special, man. When someone
thank
is
you.
that in tuned, and just a beautiful, beautiful family there, man. So congratulations to you, man. So let me ask you, do you know all their names? Do I challenge you and say, no, I'm not gonna do that to you, man. I'm
I
not
got
gonna
it.
do that to you.
I got it. I got it. I'm good. No, it is an honor. That's really, I mean, you're looking at one of the reasons why we decided to run, because when you have such drastic policy changes going on in your own party, being advanced by your own party, and then you find yourself saying that, no, this isn't the direction that our state should be taking. We have a better direction. We can see an opportunity for individual freedoms to be protected. That's what we're called to do as public officials. We have an oath that we took. We want to make sure that we empower people and bring the power back to each individual, and make sure that the opportunities are there, that they're not slipping away and leaving the state. And that's really ground zero for me. I mean, the children are really, my wife and I, made a decision based upon the fact that our kids need a future. And when we were expecting, she said, I told her, I said, look, if you want me to drop out, I mean, this is you and the baby are first. I mean, and she's like,
Oh,
no, absolutely.
absolutely.
She said, no, this is why you're running. You're running because of the future. And so let's go. So that was
Well,
encouraging.
that is fantastic, and I got to tell you, maybe in 10 years, 15 years, you would win in a landslide because I know all of them would vote for you, and you have more than enough to make a difference.
My
So
secret weapon.
the margin of error for polls goes in your favor right here in this picture, man. So
I think I'm losing you. Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. You guys still got me there?
Okay. Now I hear you. Good.
Got you. Can we go to the next slide? So let me. Is this you?
That is not me.
I saw this picture and I said, well, we're going to act like it's you. You were up at Musket Ridge, at some sort of event for yourself. And I know that you were a college athlete, and I want to talk about that because, not everybody may have known you had 10 kids. Not everybody may have known that you have a wife. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And this is part of the discernment that I think is important for people, particularly when they do the comparative issues, because we could have jumped right into it, and talked about certain things. But I don't think that that's always the right thing to do. Let's put the humanistic aspect to everyone first, and then let's get into the political aspect. But anyway, are you a golfer?
Oh, I am. My wife and I actually share that interest together, and I think if only we had more time is kind of the issue. So I probably, because of the lack of golfing that I actually do, I love it, but I probably would have been the guy in the sand pit.
Now,
But
now you were a track guy because you went to
I
Mount
was.
St. Mary's, right? You
That's
went you
right.
went out
Yes.
to Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg, right?
Yes. That's right. And my best friend from college was from Queens, and he taught me how to run. We were he was Olympic level as well as a couple other my buddies, and so I was aspiring. Best thing I ever did was I beat him in one of the events in the decathlon. But I was thrilled and honored to be part of that upbringing and have the opportunity there at the Mount and to do the NCAA Division One. They put me on leg 3 on the 4x4. So if you know what that means, if you're a track athlete, you know that means I was the weak one. But at the end of the day, we won the Eastern Nationals, and that was exciting to be part of that. And that taught me a lot. As many athletes will tell you, it teaches you perseverance, it teaches you strength, it teaches you to press on when you're hurt, and it teaches you to endure through the finish line, to run past the finish line. And I ended up hurting, getting an injury, and that kind of knocked me out from some of my aspirations. But it taught me a lot in life to say that, you can accomplish things. I went from a high school level of athletic ability to a walk-on a really with an Olympic coach. And at the end of the 2 years, I was competing up there at the decathlon level of some of the trials. Some of the Olympic trials guys were just a couple points off from me. So I was aspiring, but I was grateful to God that he said, don't waste your time continually on this because you'll probably never be that good at it. So let's do something else. So let's go ahead and get an injury now. and so the other option was, well, go to law school. So that's kind of how I ended up continuing my studies.
Well, I was a track guy at Northeastern University in Boston, big time track. And so I know quite a few of my friends because you're right, Mount St. Mary's has a phenomenal program. And I'll tell you now, the third leg on the 4x4 is not the weak leg. I watched the women's NCAAs last week, and the champion in the 400-meter hurdles, right, a female, she ran the third leg, walked 5 down because everyone thinks that's the third leg, right? So you put your strongest on the third leg. So that's what they did, right? They had their strongest on the third leg, right? So we'll leave that at that. So
Very
what's that
kind.
next slide?
Very kind.
Now who are these characters, Delegate? Is this your street team?
Well, so this is a group of families. Some of them are my kids. If you look directly in the center, you'll see my daughter front and center. She is actually helping to run the campaign, and she, pardon that phone. She is Patience Faith. She's my field director and doing an incredible job helping with managing all 24 jurisdictions on this campaign. Then she's in the black sweater there. If you look to her right or to my left on the screen, the lady in the hat is a volunteer. Then next to that is my daughter Lexi, and she's a sweet young lady. And then my son Micah, and then the girl behind Micah is my daughter Lydia, and then the tall kid behind the other lady in the hat with the sunglasses. That's Josh. He's 16 now, 6'3", and I look up to him. But we're very, very grateful to have.
Well, that's a heck of a team you have, and let's give a shout out to Patience Faith. So Miss Faith, if you're watching, thank you so much. Very communicative, very professional. Good representation of you, Delegate Cox, because she kept everything us informed as to what was happening. So big shout out to Miss Faith, Patience Faith. She's done an awesome job, at least with us. So what's that next slide in there? Where are we going to that next slide? Okay, so who is this? Is that another important partner of yours?
That's right. So in the process of running for governor, one of the things that Maryland does differently than some states is you are required when you file to have picked a running mate. And so we did an extensive professional review of about 7 different candidates and kind of narrowed that down to about 2. And it was a very wonderful time getting to know some great leaders in the state, people that care. And one of them was this young lady, Jordana Schiffinelli, is a mama bear, is what I call her. And she is not a politician. She's not as polished as some politicians sometimes, but she's very polished in focusing on the issues that matter to a lot of Marylanders. You know, what's going on in our schools? Are we failing our kids? And that's kind of what happened to her. She really felt like that the academics were failing, and she didn't want her kids to miss out on that. And so they focused on restoring a lot of the academics in Queen Anne's County. She's working to make that something that will be attractive across the state. And we both care passionately, for instance, about Baltimore City. And when you look at how the city has just been, in my view, failed, I mean, we need to restore a sense of vision for our young people in Baltimore City, that they can be the best that they can be. They can be world class, but they need to have the education that we have promised them in the Constitution of Maryland. It's really
attractive. I want to get to that. And, you know, you're right about Ms. Schiffinelli. You know, I read her background. You know, she's an immigrant, self-described immigrant. She's an attorney as yourself. Yeah. And, you know, you are a serious candidate. And as we shift now into some of the platforms and some of your political beliefs, I want to talk a bit about her and maybe use a bit of an excerpt in a second to kind of explain your platforms, particularly in Baltimore. You know, but she seems to be someone that you believe would serve in the event that you are not, if you're elected governor, is she the right person to be the governor that succeeds you if something happens? Did you look at it from that perspective?
Oh, yes, you have to look at, you know, that from that perspective, particularly since we're public servants for the state of Maryland. And, you know, one of the things in the background is looking at lines of authority. She's perfectly fine and agreed with, you know, the proper lines of authority in the state that the Constitution dictates. And then at the same time, her history shows that her husband is a retired Green Beret. They've served our country well, and she's been a professor at the Naval Academy. So they love our country. They love and understand the principles that we need to continue to keep our freedoms here and to make sure that our government runs well and that is running for the people and not, you know, just taking a lot of money and wasteful spending. So we want to kind of focus on making sure that our schools really are great again. And that's, I think, an expertise area that she can lend, just like our good Lieutenant Governor now, a wonderful man. I just actually was with him moments ago. He was here with me. He was here at the funeral. I was with him.
You're talking about Boyd Rutherford, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Boyd Rutherford, right?
That's right. Boyd Rutherford gave some wonderful remarks here at the funeral. And one of the things that the governors tend to do is they like to find a professional lieutenant governor who can kind of take to heart some of the issues that can be a real service to the people of Maryland. And I know Boyd has advanced that with the fentanyl epidemic, and we intend to continue that. I think that Jordana brings to the table a lot of education expertise. She speaks 3 languages. She's got a PhD in economics as well as being an attorney. So I think
one thing I'd like to do, Delegate Cox, I'd like to kick us off in some of the platform issues and some of the issues related to your political beliefs by playing a very short snippet or video that she represents your views on law enforcement and the need for in Baltimore. So, production team, could you play that snippet of Miss Schiffinelli, please? And we'll let Delegate Cox comment after it.
Marylanders live in fear. Crime in our cities is out of control. Our children are getting shot in gun-free zones in Baltimore. Marylanders need to support and fund our police officers because they keep us safe.
No parent should have to lose their child to gun violence. Baltimore needs strong and honest leadership. There is hope.
Prosecutors need to stop making senseless plea deals with criminals who are then released back into our communities. I believe I can help bring peace to Maryland. I know we can do better.
Paid for by Citizens for Giordana Schiffinelli for Lieutenant Governor, Ann Williams, Treasurer.
I know we can do it. Together, we can make Maryland safe again.
Delegate Cox, that was a very powerful piece right there. And a couple things about that piece. I'm going to ask you questions about your platform, specifically on crime and justice, right? But a couple of things noticeable in that. Kim Klacik, right, who was a very well-respected Republican candidate for Congress, right? Raised a lot of money, got well-known all throughout the country, endorsed you, right? From Baltimore. Yes. So can we talk specifically to what Mrs. Schiffinelli represented of the Cox-Schiffinelli ticket as to what you see as the changes and what you would do different in your crime and justice platform for the state? And if you want to use Baltimore City as an example, feel free to do that. But we want to talk substance in terms of what you see we need to do.
Well, sure. And, it's an honor that Kim Klacik has been so gracious to endorse us and to help us out. I was very honored that she would step forward, and she is a rock star and a leader of her own right, and really cares. I mean, one of the things that when you talk with Kim is that she really does care. I mean, her focus about West Baltimore, for instance, and just the heartbreak that's going on there every day really matters. And I think when you look at the state as a whole, it's not just Baltimore City that is having a lot of leniency with some of the more violent crimes. We need to make sure that that our prosecutors are able to do the deals that they need to do, but they have to stop letting the violent criminals out on the streets. And the shocking way that people that they shoot people up and then walk is not something that is going to prosper Maryland, number one. And number two is not only not going to prosper, it will kill us. It will kill our families, because when the lawless are running around shooting people and there's no justice, there's no sense of accountability to that, there's no safety to raise our kids here anymore. So this is an urgent thing, and I'm very interested in focus. Let me just plug this in real quickly while I'm talking. But our campaign focus is to make sure that we empower citizen policing. So I am a practical politician in the sense that I'm not really a politician. I'm somebody that's just a dad. I care deeply about our communities. I believe community policing is very important to advance local interest. And I believe in local policing and local authority over policing, such that's why I think the constitutional structure in Maryland is a sound one that originally focuses on direct election of our law enforcement. In other words, directly accountable to the people. And historically, any issues that have existed have been better and more quickly fixed at the ballot box by the people when they were unsatisfied. But right now, we don't have that option because we have prosecutors that are letting people back out, and then we don't actually have local control of policing. And I'm not trying to in any way talk down about BPD or those individuals that are really serving well with all their hearts. I'm behind them, but we've got to do something different. What's going on now is not working. It is.
What would you do? It appears as though the Baltimore City Police constitutionally to the state is one in which the state oversees the Baltimore City Police, but they give them that autonomy. If you were the governor right now, would you be considering taking over the policing in Baltimore City? Would that be a tool that you use?
Yes, it would be. And it would obviously have to be constitutional and under the jurisdiction that's already existing with the consent decree that's already there. That's supposed to have helped, but it doesn't seem to be helping. And I think that when you look at the mandate that the governor has to protect people in Baltimore City, it's not just in my view, it's not just on the mayor's plate that this is happening. It's not just on the mayor's watch that this is going on. It is, but it's also on the governor's watch. And, it's very sad to me that during this last session in Annapolis, not one time were the legislators called to a conference committee of any kind of joint conference with the mayor of Baltimore City and the governor. And I don't recall even a discussion regarding how to fix the issues in Baltimore City. That was a larger discussion. Now, I know that there had been some private meetings, and that's good, but it doesn't seem to have gotten anywhere, because we still have really the same system happening where you have people shooting people up if they catch them at all, which, by the way, only happens, according to the statistics that we were given, less than 30% of the time do they ever catch anybody that's actually putting holes in people like this. So there's no prosecution of 70%. And then the 30% that they do catch, it's like a revolving door. And again,
is there a social economic issue with crime as well that you would tackle? Is there a different dynamic in Baltimore City? As an example, let's talk about Baltimore City as an example. We know that police officer that you attended, or you're attending his funeral today, was killed in Wycomico across the bridge. So there are some dangerous areas in our counties and cities, but the socio-economic aspect of crime, do you recognize, or how do you recognize that in a city like Baltimore with so much depression and vacant housing and people with underemployment? How do you integrate that into your policies?
Well, excuse me. Well, yes, there is, and just as a side note, one of the sad things about what occurred is a combination of both. First of all, the lack of prosecution in Baltimore City let this man out and allowed him. He had just committed burglary. I think it was armed robbery or burglary of some kind, and literally then he goes down and and commits this an execution. It's very horrific. That's a policy decision that was made from the state's attorney's office in Baltimore City that needs to stop. Secondly, all of these young people in Baltimore need to have a vision. The Bible says, without vision, the people perish. Well, this is a practical thing that we can do immediately. Why don't we have our rec centers fully geared with athletic facilities ready to go for these young people after school hours, where they can actually go and have state-of-the-art facilities available to them to play ball, to accomplish additional athletic goals, or just maybe a community center that has connected with different civic organizations that can also provide mentoring of different kinds. If the kids aren't into sports, something to keep them out of the cartels and the gangs. That's what's happening. There's also a family structure problem. Okay, so I absolutely am heartbroken when I see so many young people with no real interaction with adults, that they might feel that no one loves them. It's not true, but they might feel that way because they don't have a dad there in their lives. And that's a tragedy. So many of these young people just don't have that interconnected family structure that can build them up and kind of keep them pointed in the right direction. That's because of in my opinion, it's a direct result of some of these bad governmental policies that simply throw a lot of money at a situation without actually trying to incentivize, people to come alongside and actually be there to mentor, to make sure the family structure can hopefully continue in some fashion, even when there's disruption from the community of some kind. But that's not happening, and so you end up with literally hundreds of young men, especially without a connection, without a mentor, and without resources. And
so you're prepared to come up with platforms to address this, particularly as it relates to socioeconomic education. I want to get to education because I want to be very respectful of your time. I know you're down on the Eastern Shore, and I know you got to travel. So I don't want to extend our interview, although I know hopefully we'll be able to bring you back. But I want to get to some other points related to crime and justice. So you mentioned citizen policing. Is that kind of like a vigilante sort of thing? where citizens have the ability to carry weapons and protect themselves? Because reading some of your policy, I believe that you support, carry laws to its fullest extent. Is that true?
That is true. I'm a Second Amendment advocate, and I'll tell you, one of the most racist policies, in my opinion, in Maryland is that we give gun permits to wealthy business people, but we deny them from those who might need them the most to defend their own homes, their own families, their children. And so long as you're law-abiding and not a danger to someone, you should get your permit. That's just the way it should be. Now, I don't believe in vigilantism, so I want to be very clear about that. That's not something that I believe is community policing. When I say community policing, I'm talking about officers that are trained by the the proper training in the police academy, that live within the community, that they're part of family. So almost there's a family dynamic and everyone knows one another. It's the old-fashioned model where you would have someone that would be really right there, part of the community, and would walk the beat kind of thing. We need to get back to a community-based model so that people know and trust law enforcement.
I think people may agree with you in terms of the ability to carry a weapon, but do they need to carry an AK-15? What do you think about assault weapons, particularly when you look at what happened in Buffalo, New York, and what happened in Uvalde, Texas? How far do you see the Second Amendment? Is it something that you feel needs to be protected with all sorts of weapons, even weapons of war, which an AK-15 seems to be?
So yes, I do believe in the protection of that, and I'll explain real briefly what I mean. So at the founding of the country, the British wanted to bring us under subjection by one method, and that was to seize our guns. And so the purpose of the Second Amendment was not for hunting. It was to be able to carry a gun that you could stop a tyrant with, both either in your home for self-defense or, if necessary, to defend the country, from some kind of tyranny or invasion. So these are interests that I think are demonstrated also internationally. When you look at the countries that have removed the right to have arms, such as Australia, you see a direct correlation to the vaccine camps. I'm not sure if your listeners are probably more familiar than me and some of the news, but just because I'm on the road so much. But I have become aware that in Australia, they literally carry people off, just like China, carry people off to quarantine camps against their will, separating them from their homes, including children. And that doesn't happen, in countries where people are armed, because they'll say, no, you're not going to separate our family.
But an AK-15, is that a necessary weapon to protect yourself with, to a point where in this country we see some of the atrocities with people with the mental conditions? And Delegate Cox, I see you, particularly after doing our initial, view of your family, and you talk about the love of God. But I want to play something before we go further in the conversation. I think you're familiar with former Governor Grettens out of Missouri, right? Eric Grettens out of Missouri. I ran across, and I'm sure you hear about this controversial video that he played that does a conservative Republican no favors. Cue up that video and let's see, let Delegate Cox see what we're watching in America.
Striking fear in the hearts of liberals everywhere, folks. Liberals beware.
Is that America that you know and love, Delegate Cox? Is this you? I couldn't imagine you, particularly in the state of Maryland. I'd be very disappointed to think that this is something that you endorse.
I think that was unfortunate, the wording that he used to kind of pit one against another, and I'm not for that. I'm for uniting our state and our country. And I think that when you
you denounced the wording that he used, that this is for you liberals. Did you hear what he said?
Yeah, because I'll tell you, I don't think he understood that liberal means. Let me tell you this: in my committee, we have liberal gun groups, Democrats that love the Second Amendment that come into my committee. I think almost more than Republicans, because why? Because they're sometimes the ones that have been denied the most. And so you look back, and one of the reasons that we have some of our most strict gun laws, if you do the research on it, it's because there were some groups that did not want the Black American to arm themselves. And I denounce anything like that. I think all Americans have.
I hear you. You know what? And I feel good about having you here for the purposes of explaining your platform to you and I as Americans see something of that nature and realize how egregious and how irresponsible it was, not necessarily for the action of the gun, but what he said in intimidation and why we see what we see in America in terms of some of these mass shootings. I mean, so are we both denouncing that?
Yes, the language of liberals beware that wasn't necessary, and it wasn't right. It wasn't right. And, I think if I can tell you what I think a lot of gun owners are concerned about, and it's not liberals per se, it's communists, because it's the communist that wants to take our, all of our rights away. It's the communist that says the state owns us. It's the communist that wants to experiment on us with the EUA jab, in my opinion, and that's horrible.
What's that? What's the EUA jab? Explain that to the viewers.
So all of the experiments going on right now, being pushed by Bill Gates and the international global community for the last 2 years, has included what's called an emergency use authorization, which is in short EUA. And the point of that is, under federal law, as long as you have informed consent that this is an experimental drug you're taking, that it's allowed to be used under the FDA standards. Now, unfortunately, some of the money makers have tried to force this on us. And we have seen in history that when medical experiments have been forced on people, it never is a positive thing. It's not part of our democratic understanding. It's not part of our respect for individual liberties. And we see this time and time again. Many disadvantaged communities are the ones that they experiment on. And yes, it is an experimental drug.
Wow. Well, I think you get agreement with the Black community on that aspect when you talk about Henrietta Lacks and the Tuskegee or the Tuskegee Airmen, yes, some of these soldiers that were, yes, vaccinated, et cetera. And let me ask you a question relative to that that's very close to us, because I know that you are a big proponent of no vaccine mandates, no mask mandates. Do you think that the recent CDC, in terms of, with some of the requirements with vaccines, totally against that? Or you think it should be a choice? And then asking you as a public official a question relative to your vaccine status. Are you vaccinated?
Well, I'll be respectful to you and say it's none of your business.
Okay, well, you know what? Hey, listen. Hey, Delegate, that's cool.
No, let me explain what I mean by that. Let me explain what I mean. So I believe firmly in individual liberties, and that includes medical privacy. So one of the things that the Speaker of the House and I get along with on is this issue that says that our bodies deserve and demand the rights and the civil rights of privacy. And so this whole vaccine passport idea that says that my opponent, Kelly Schultz, wants to force on us, by the way, with the, it's called the myirmobile.com. It's a QR code vaccine passport. I denounce all of that. I'm going to order it to end on day one as a mandate. Now, can someone choose to be vaccinated? I support that. In fact, I did my dissertation in law school as a focus on the 14th Amendment, civil liberties under forced vaccination emergencies, which is very odd that happened because I did it after 9/11. I thought that's probably not something I'm going to need in the near future, but it was very interesting to me. My wife was concerned. She went to a pediatrician with our kid. I was going to write my article on the nuances of property law and taxation or something like that. and my wife was like, that doesn't help me because I just got told by my pediatrician that we're going to get kicked out of her practice if we don't do 17 jabs for our kid. And I'm like, what? So I did some research. I looked into it, and I believe firmly in parental rights and in the individual human right of informed consent. And consent goes way back to the Nuremberg Code. It's actually mandated in federal law under the EUA. The Emergency Use Authorization requires informed consent, and every doctor takes an oath to it. You cannot force someone into a medical choice. And yet we're getting away from that with this top-down big pharma approach. And I think we can turn that ship back. I'm very focused on that. I think it's important that we preserve our liberties for everyone. And
that's a fair point. Delegate Cox, that's a very fair point. And I respect that, as well as I respect you telling me none of my business, man, because, hey, listen, I get it, because I probably would have said the same thing, understanding your views and perspective. And as I mentioned before, I want to be very respectful for your time.
And I hope you took that as the kind joke I intended.
It is all good. It is all good. I swallowed that one well, But, I've got like 8 minutes with you left officially, given, our hour. And I want to get to a couple of points. And if I can stretch you out to 8.5 minutes, man, that'll be fantastic. But I want to get to your education platform. And I want to give you a little bit of time to wrap up and ensure that viewers know who you are and why they should support you, because that's important. But first, before that, let's talk about these January 6 hearings. You went to Washington, D.C. to support then what I believe. Well, I don't want to speak for you. Why did you attempt to go to Washington, D.C. January 6?
So there was a rally at the White House on the Mall, and I took my children. I'm very civic minded for my kids, because we also homeschool them. And so I wanted them to be exposed once again to the political process. It's historic. The White House was there. The president was going to speak. There were going to be other dignitaries speaking. And that's why we went. And it was, the topic of the day was whether or not the competing electors should be returned to some of the swing states by the vice president, as Hillary Clinton herself had requested in 2016, and as I believe it was Nixon had done to Hawaii in 1972. So I thought, well, this is a great historic moment to stand with the president and to encourage our constitutional process, because the vice president is not permitted to certify likely or knowingly or recklessly certify electors when there's a allegation of fraud.
So you're saying that you believe that Vice President Pence had a right to not certify that election. Is that what you're saying?
Well, ultimately, he's required to certify it at a certain point in time, yes, under the Constitution, but not at that moment, because under the Constitution and under precedent, the vice president had a duty to return electors to the states where there were material sworn statements of fraud. And that's what we had. I mean, we had Arizona with sworn statements. We had Michigan, Wisconsin, we had Nevada. All of those swing states had sworn electors on both.
Does it mean anything to you that Vice President Pence disagrees with you?
Well, no, I respect that. And I think that ultimately he made a choice that was obviously different than what he had communicated in the past. He said he was going to make sure that he got to the bottom of this, that he was going to make sure that we had a clear investigation of this. And at the end of the day, he made a decision, to move forward. And I think that was the wrong decision constitutionally.
Well, some people have a high regard and respect for him, regardless of whether they like his policy as the former governor of Indiana. And so you made comments beyond that, and actually sent a letter to the Speaker of Maryland's House, Adrian Jones, apologizing for a tweet or something that you said that was detrimental to Vice President Pence at that time. Can you explain that and what your thoughts were in doing that, and then later on, when you rethought it, why you felt the need to either retract or apologize for it?
Well, I think because at the moment, it wasn't, a lot of rhetoric gets thrown around, and I try very hard not to throw rhetoric around, and I did that day, and I had hindsight to see that it was actually a very important moment to not throw rhetoric around in hindsight. You look back and you realize, wow, we didn't have, because I wasn't actually, close, so I didn't know what everything was going on. And looking back, I made that clear understanding that it was improper, it was inappropriate for me to have said that,
Right.
particularly considering all the ramifications that were going on. And so I sent a letter to the Speaker of the House, my friend Adrian, apologizing that it was an inappropriate thing to have said, especially at that time.
Well,
But,
at least that was an acknowledgement by you. And I think, we have to respect that when someone acknowledges wrong and, given, some of what you say. And Maryland is a very diverse state. You are a very serious candidate, which is why we have you here. You're within the margin of error to represent the Republican Party in an election of which we have had a Republican governor in this state the past 8 years, and I think 20 of the past 24 years or something of that nature. So it's real. And then within that margin of error, there's a supermajority of the silent majority that people know that, and that's, I see you smiling. You know what I'm talking about, that silent majority that may push you over the top, right? So we want to understand, particularly in certain demographics, how you would govern a diverse state like this. A comment you made, Delegate Cox states he is a believer in the goodness of God for the people of our great state, right? And so that's why you're running for governor, understanding that our state looks very diverse. Some of your supporters are very diverse that look like that. But, let's talk for a couple of minutes as we have left about education, critical race theory, your thoughts about critical race theory. You denounce that very stringently as something that should be part of any curriculum in any school district in our state. Can you speak to that?
Yes, and I think we need to get back to teaching that the wonderful blessings of America, particularly in our state. We have not only the state of the national anthem, but we have the state of Frederick Douglass, the state of Harriet Tubman, the state of Dr. Ben Carson, who has saved children's lives. We have a wonderful, diverse history in this state. And I think we're getting away from that. We're allowing Marxists, in essence, to hijack our history by saying that, okay, we're going to now divide everyone against each other by saying that we have this critical problem called systemic racism, that is meaning not that we have had racism and that we still fight it today, which I agree with that. That's not what's being taught. What's being taught is that our institutions are fundamentally flawed and they need to be replaced. So we need to get rid of democracy. We need to get rid of these systems that we have, and we need to start saying.
Give me an example of a flawed institution that they could be referring to when you say an institution.
All of it, from the police to the legislature, okay, to the system of government that we have. I think some of the advocates would like to move to a different model on a lot of this, and I think the problem isn't the model. We have one of the best models in the world. I think the problem is that we have to continue to persevere in our history and unifying one another with reminding each one of us that you can be and do whatever you want to do in life. That's the beauty of America. That's the beauty of our state. I mean, we have opportunities that everyone has an equal advantage for, and equality needs to be advanced. And where there is a lack of equality, I believe that we need to bring to bear our Constitution and our equal justice under law principle for everyone. And that would include, for instance, Baltimore City. It breaks my heart that Baltimore City not only has one of the most difficult education, lacking of education in our state, but it also has twice the property taxes of most other jurisdictions. Now, why is it that we can't get this done? I intend, as a broad-based coalition of governance, to make these issues a priority. And I have the ability to do it because, as someone who's an outsider, I don't really care as much. Now, I care deeply about people and their opinions and viewpoints, and I'm going to listen carefully. But I don't care about those things, those those very powerful interests that are holding back our state to this very day. And why is it that we have not corrected these issues and not brought the relief? This is a time. This is a time to rebuild, and I think we can get it done.
Well, final question for you from me before I give you time to, for your final thoughts. Final question for me. Should the Black citizens of the state of Maryland, or how did the Black citizens of the state of Maryland view you? And do you believe that there's a message that you can convey to them to support your campaign and not be apprehensive of you as a candidate for governor, knowing that you've been endorsed by Donald Trump, who many Blacks feel is they're scared of that philosophy?
So Donald Trump passed the First Step Act, which I supported. I want to do that in Maryland. I think we can get back to stopping the improper overreach of government and, restrain our government officials and give power back to the people. And I think when you look at my friends both across the aisle in the Democrat Party, as well as my Black friends, I mean, I have a lot in common, having really grown up lower middle class and then practiced law for 3.5 years, almost 4 years in East Baltimore, and seeing the needs and having, the real desire to make a difference and to reach out and to do what I can. I'm actually someone who, having grown up in a large family, I understand that there are times when we have to come together as a community to build one another up, to say, here's the opportunities that we can provide that empower individuals to advance their economic interests, even though they don't come from a wealthy background. And I'll give you a quick example. I firmly believe that property ownership is a path forward for young people. That's what happened in my life that allowed me to go to law school. So I am somebody that had $2,000 when I was married in savings that I saved up. I think I saved 6 years working 3 jobs and finishing my degree. And I finally had a little $2,000 in my savings. I get married. And what happened for me that opened doors to go to law school was that I had a father who cared enough to mentor me and to say, look, instead of spending your $2,000 on a nice car or something that you want, how about investing in a down payment on a piece of ground, a piece of dirt? And it was a small mountainous piece of land, but it was mine. I bought it. I bought it with a down payment. And then I found out very quickly that the banks love the equity that's in our land. And so when you have land, when you own title, you begin to have opportunities. And the banks allowed me to build a house. And I used, after I built the house, my wife agreed. I had to, get permission first because this was a big deal. It's not just my house. It's also her house. But we decided to sell our house and use that money to go to law school because I didn't have a scholarship to go to law school. I mean, I had a small scholarship, but that was the only path for me to go to law school, was to be able to use my sweat equity. And that gave me a lot of pride and made me persevere in law school. I might have dropped out because I didn't like it the first semester, but that kind of vision is what I think young people need. When I go on the street and I'm talking to my, the 20 to 30-year-olds, particularly kids that are in their early 20s, my kids' age, and their friends, they have one thing. How in the heck did you get along, Dad, in your early 20s? Because we can hardly pay the gas bill to go to work. That's what we need to change. And that's what I think a lot of our leadership and, both parties are missing. And if we can cast that vision, if we can say that this is how we can empower young people to get control of their own finances and to have opportunity through that, through hard work, that's going to change Maryland. You're going to see not only people investing here, but they're going to want to stay and they're going to want to have a family.
Well, that's powerful, Delegate Cox. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. And what I'd like to do now is give you a couple of minutes, to talk to the viewers about your candidacy and our particular viewers. And As I mentioned earlier, our demographics is pretty diverse. So, hey, here's your time.
Well, thank you, Michael. It was a real honor. Thank you for accommodating me, and even in the context of the delay from the funeral. That really was. If anybody gets a chance to watch the funeral, I highly recommend it. It was beautiful. But I am running to restore your freedoms. It's your freedom. It's not the government's freedom. This matters practically. I never thought just 3 years ago I'd be saying this as a state delegate, and now as a candidate for governor, that the Constitution is yours. It's personal. If I would have said this before the jab for jobs, if I would have said this before the lockdowns, when they shut down our churches and they shut down our businesses and our small businesses are being crushed, and yet the big box wealthy stores were open, the liquor stores were there, and the various other essential quote unquote businesses were there, and yet I'm going to restore and say that never again is this going to happen. Every person is essential. Why does that matter? It matters practically for the hairdressers. It matters practically for the restaurant owners. It matters practically for all of our great small businesses. That's 50% of our lifeblood in Maryland. And then to add on to that, it's personal for our medical freedom. It's personal for our education freedom. It's personal to make sure that we have a future for our kids. And so when we focus on practical applications of the Constitution and the laws to empower people, rather than to just simply pad the pockets of the connected, you see why the Trump tax cut is sitting in the Treasury right now. I want to give it back to us. All the people need to have that. If you're in another state, you got a windfall because the tax cuts that came down in Maryland, it was $2.5 billion. That's the people's money. It should go right back, because then if you get an extra $2,000 or maybe $2,500 because it's your money, then now you can invest in something and you can better yourself. And it shouldn't be sitting in the Treasury. That's number one. Number two, I believe that the property tax issue in Maryland is probably the number one issue that we can unify on and come together and reduce, because when you look at the outrageous inflation going on at the pump and also with our property, the tax bills, depending on the county, they've gone up 30 to 34% for your property taxes. That hurts tenants. So how in the world are we going to have affordable housing unless we get control of this? I believe firmly that we are going to lose our young people if we don't have affordable housing. And the path for affordable housing is to lower our tax assessments, which the governor controls, has oversight of under the Department of Taxation and Assessments. And so if we do what my plan does, is to move us to the constant dollar approach so that inflation is taken into account and we don't overinflate our taxation and allow for those payments to come back down. That's it. That's important and essential. And then obviously we need to restore law and order to our communities by empowering local communities to have the policing and the funding they need. And it's an outrage. Michael, on my watch, I fought against this, but on my watch, they added $2 billion to a welfare and a catch and release program for unvetted foreign nationals being bused and flown in from the southern border, which God bless them if they're here. If they're coming for freedom, we love legal immigrants. That's America. But that's not exactly what's going on. They're being paid for by our tax dollars while we're being crushed at the pump. We're being crushed in the taxpayer system. That's not helping our jobs for our young black men, our young people and women that are needing jobs right out of high school or out of college. Literally under President Trump, we had the highest job increase in the history of the country for all demographics. And yet now we're in a free fall with jobs. And so I think we can turn that around and say, let's, instead of putting $2 billion in that program, how about we say, let's put that money right back into our own communities. Let's say if we have that money, let's return the tax cuts. Let's make sure that the small business in the opportunity zones, the enterprise zones are funded, not only with initial capital setup money. I think they need follow-up assistance when we have, especially like we've had sincere problems coming back off of this pandemic lockdown. We've got to make sure our small businesses in our communities are able to remain viable. And I think that making sure that the money goes to our own Marylanders and their small businesses is the key. It's already there in our education system, but yet unfortunately, Boost program was cut, and the money's not going as much to the parents as it should. I want to increase that and make sure school choice is there for our parents. No one else is calling for school choice in this race. I am your candidate to do that. I'm asking for your support on this because you matter, my kids matter, our kids in Maryland matter. We've got to get a handle on this or we're going to lose them all. They're all going to leave the state and they're going to be angry at us because they're not going to be able to compete on a world stage because they weren't given the education opportunities that the Constitution mandates. And instead, the money was squandered on things. So I think with a $62 billion budget, you've got a path forward to make sure that we empower the people once again. And I intend to do that. And I'm asking for your support. CoxForFreedom.com.
Thank you so much, Delegate Cox. It's been an enlightening conversation. I will be back in touch with Miss Faith, on July 20th, because, maybe you'll be there, So
all the way.
Yeah. So thank you so much again. Travel safely home, and we'll be in touch with you July 20th.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. You've been watching 60 Minutes in Black America. Today we featured Delegate Dan Cox, who is the Republican gubernatorial candidate for the state of Maryland and a serious gubernatorial candidate, particularly with the silent majority that has not made a decision between him and Schultz, who we've also invited on this show and have not heard from her because he was within that margin of error. We have a Republican governor now. We need to understand how Delegate Cox would govern Maryland with its diversity, and he gave us that message today, and we're very appreciative of this. You will be able to watch this in our usual prime time on Sunday at 6 p.m. Okay, so you can watch this replay of Delegate Cox on Sunday at 6 p.m. along with my commentary that day as we talk again with Delegate Cox about his platform for change for the state of Maryland. Thank you all so much. Thanks to Dion and to Jeremiah, our production team today. You've been watching 60 Minutes in Black America. Good afternoon.